Dr. Jeffrey Funk, thank you very much for joining me today. How are you?
Good to be here.
So I reached out to you specifically because I don't think that there's anybody better than you and your background to provide some insight in terms of what's happening in this crazy marketplace for valuations and startups and AI. And there's so much to talk about and unravel. But why don't we get started and just walk me through memory lane? Like, how did you get to? First of all, maybe we'll start with your PhD. What was it in? What your thesis about? And then maybe walk me through where you are today as an advisor and a technologist.
Well, I'm 68 years old. I was 13 when we landed on the moon in 1969. I'll tell you, I was pretty excited. And I was a big reader of science fiction.
Hold on for a second.
Big in Star Trek.
Let's double click on that. So they did land on the moon, right?
Yeah, they did.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, because some people are,
I know.
they question it.
Yeah. And so I was an optimist in technology from a very early age, reading lots of science fiction. I majored in physics. I was very optimistic. I worked in the semiconductors for a while before I went back to my PhD. And I did my PhD on economics of robots. So again, I was really optimistic about that. But then throughout the 1980s, it began to appear that, the robots weren't diffusing that quickly. There were other things that were more important than robots, like just-in-time manufacturing. So, there was a lot. So I've been thinking about these issues for a very long time. And then in around 2000, I happened to be looking at just product development, pretty boring management of product development in Japan, because I'd been interested in Japan since the early 80s. And this whole Japanese mobile internet took off. So I became part of this, and this was, I was making more money consulting on that than I was from a university salary there. And eventually, though, the rest of the world tired of what Japan and also South Korea were doing, and so I decided to move on. I moved to Singapore, and I was teaching at National University of Singapore. One of the classes I was teaching was economics and new technology. So again, I was an optimist, so I'm trying to get students excited about all these technologies, trying to show them all the trends in these technologies and that things are going really well. But over the years, by about 2013, 2014, I began to realize that the trends weren't that positive. Things were not going as quickly as I had first noticed a few years before that, and that other people were saying. So things like a lot of nanotechnology, carbon nanotubes, and then superconductor energy, bioelectronics, and a lot of these things were not getting better because I'm showing these costs and performance and stuff, and they're not getting better as fast, anywhere near as fast as people thought they were. In fact, they weren't getting better at all. I then started to notice a lot of startups because I had lots of students doing studies. I mean, I had, I would say, 250 group presentations. 50 group presentations a year. And just all kinds of things. So I was getting lots of weird stuff. It's not just, what's in the news. It's all this other stuff students are finding. And I began to realize that a lot of the startups were kind of crazy ideas, that Uber really wasn't ride sharing. It was just a taxi service. And I also started learning about the profits. By about 2018, I'd gone through and looked at all the profits of these startups or net income and realized that very few were making money. So I changed from being this optimist to this pessimist over the last 10 years. I was a super optimist. And, it's continued because the promises are always so big. People are always making these big promises. They read. Just the other day, there was this academic article about using AI in healthcare, and I went and read. It seems that nobody. The post got like 3,500 likes so far, but I went and read the article, and it hardly mentions AI. AI is a small part of what they're doing.
Dr. Funk, I think you're the only one who read it. I mean, most people just do not. I mean, we're in the age of TikTok where people make a decision whether yay or nay over a 30-second, review. Yeah. Nobody does what you do.
But I've been doing this for a long time because I was teaching this course in economics and new technologies, and you got to be prepared because you got students. I got 250 students a year, and there's a few are going to challenge me, and so if they challenge me and I can't defend myself, wow, you don't want to lose your reputation in front of students. And so I was always checking things before I'd be up there talking about them. So I see this going on where the tech bros have figured out that the best way to succeed is to increase the share price, right? And this has been going with incumbents for years, right? There's a lot of emphasis on talk of, why companies emphasize share price so much, because the CEOs are getting paid according to how high the share price is. And these tech bros are doing the same thing with these startups. They just exaggerate things to get a high valuation, to get a lot of money, to sell out and become billionaires. And then the startup never succeeds, but who cares? They're billionaires.
But I guess that's the nature of innovation, right? If you let's play the devil's advocate here. In the nature of the innovation, meaning that some technologies take off, some don't. I mean, if you look at, let's take an industry that maybe people can relate to. So I'll give you an example, right? You go to, the car industry, right? There's a lot of this innovation that is being, talked about, and they have these, every year they come out with these, whatever they call those models where they're never going to see the light of day in production. And they have all these features and, like amazing, like space shuttle type of, AI and all kinds of stuff. And some of it does, I would say is playing the devil's advocate. Some of it does trickle down to consumer, maybe in a watered down version, maybe in partial version, maybe some of it, but some of it does. I guess for innovation to succeed, you have to aim, overshoot, I guess. That's my point. And completely hit it out of the ballpark and be optimistic, eternal optimistic about the technology. So, they were talking about flying cars for a while.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. The exaggeration has been around for forever, and bubbles have also been very common for a very long time. Having read a lot of these books on bubbles, and they've and a lot of good things that come out of bubbles. The problem is that the hype and exaggeration has increased. I think it is, and that's what I kind of demonstrate in my book and argue in my book, that a lot of things are being more exaggerations are being made now than they used to be, partly because of the internet. It used to be much harder to do this because there was a small number of NBC, CBS, and ABC, and there's a small number of newspapers and magazines and main magazines. And if you wanted to get your message out there, you had to go through them, and they were very concerned about their reputation. They were very concerned about aiming for the middle of the audience, not partisan in either way. But that's changed now. On the internet, you can do anything you want. There's and a lot of the websites accept money. They'll say, well, we'll publish your article if you give us money, because they can't get users to pay them money, so they have to get the money somehow. And of course, there's lots of influencers on LinkedIn who, 1 million followers, and they get paid money for posting certain things. So the game has changed a lot, and I don't think a lot of consumers of information realize that how much more money is involved with these things than it used to be.
Yeah, and I would say that's what people mentioned, that there's bubbles of all bubbles. There's everything bubble, like almost everything is exaggerated. We live in an age of exaggeration, and I think combine what you just described, the fact that nobody vets the sources of information, I would argue that on the other side, people don't care. People don't really care if it's true or not, and they just like click, they forward something that's cool, that's like, in their minds, they're innovative, and they click like when they feel it's potentially it's gonna reflect well on them, and then like this all of the above, basically.
No, you're right. It's entertainment. It's just news is entertainment. All this is so funny. It is, whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter. It's funny, right? And that's become the way that people are. And
so let's talk a bit about AI. And first of all, AI has been around for a long time, quote unquote, in different, different variations. Machine learning. Some would argue it's just simply standard deviation. You take you take a model, you do standard deviation, and then
Yeah.
you're smiling because you know what I'm talking about. And then it has a AI kind of qualities when you make a decision. Because you
Well, I got my PhD from Carnegie Mellon in 1984, and where I looked at the economics of robots, and AI was really big back then. So people thought AI was going to revolutionize mostly image recognition, but also there's expert systems. So expert systems were going to change the way things were done, and so I was very interested in this. And of course, most of that just turned out to be hype. There are some expert systems, and there was some success, but not that much. And so I've been involved with this for a very long time. And, as I said earlier, I was mostly optimistic about it for years. I mean, I saw in the 2000s and early 2010s that the increases in computing power, Moore's Law, was going to make big data be very successful, and it was. But what it means is that it's hard to distinguish between the algorithms of 20 years ago, the big data of 10 years ago, and now the AI. And so people will be saying, well, we're doing this AI for a very long time, Amazon and Google and stuff. Well, it's just hard to really quantify what's the added benefit of AI to those businesses that's in addition to the big data and the algorithms of the past.
so now
Yeah.
yeah so now if you look at staying in the same topic, right? So you have all these businesses that are heard of AI. They feel they can potentially increase their bottom line or decrease expenses, or all of the above, and they're pouring money into it. And there's some people, winners and losers, right? There's some people that are, making a lot of money consulting these enterprise on which direction to take, but it hasn't really delivered on the promise, right? I don't know if there's any like poster child for a successful AI implementation, and most of them are just, yeah.
Right. Yeah, things get mentioned. I mean, you see Klarna mentioned as automating their call center, but then it's the only one. You're waiting for other examples to come out. They should be, and of course, a lot of people don't trust Klarna because it's been releasing a lot of, it's just one of these startups that's trying to survive and always overstating their profits. And oh no, they don't state it the proper accounting way. And so yeah, we keep looking for these stories. And I read so many articles about these applications are already taking off. They're blah 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 blah. Then you read the article and you realize that they're not talking about something that has happened. They're talking about something that will happen. Right? It's always the fallback position. They don't want to tell you what's happening. They'll tell you what's going to happen.
Maybe they believe in self-fulfilling prophecy. Just the fact that they're talking about success, they're going to be successful.
Well, there's a lot of desperate people. I mean, a lot of people bought into this hype, bet their careers on it, not just buying stock, but betting their careers on it, learning all this stuff. It has to work out for them, right? They've made this bet. You've got VCs who lost money because the last set of startups didn't do that well. And so they're going to bet it on AI, because if they can get one big winner, then it will erase all those losses from the past. And so they're willing to say almost anything to have that happen.
And, it's talking about VCs, right? So there's a whole thing about, companies just sprinkle AI on top of whatever they're already doing.
Yeah.
But then there are VCs are saying, well, we want to invest in AI first companies, or technology first, or AI first.
Yeah.
And then if you look around, open the hood, and you view that it's basically the same as always. They combine some machine learning, or maybe they use existing LLMs to solve a problem that's not big enough, and it's maybe a feature, not not an actual platform or something that they can go out and. And then you have companies out there. Everybody is like, Microsoft is with Copilot, Salesforce, all the big tech companies, even LinkedIn has its own, suggested, response. And I don't know if you ever used that, Dr. Funk, but it's horrible. Like I would never, ever want to, and I know it's an early stage, but would I ever publish something like that? I mean, it's obvious that it was written by AI and not even a good implementation of AI.
Yeah. A lot of this, these large language models, I mean, it is amazing how well they work, but they don't work as well as many of us want. Those of us who are in media and who have a message, are selling a message, right? We're very particular about that message. We're very particular about what we say. We're very particular about reputation. So we're very hesitant to use this stuff. And I've experimented some, and I don't experiment that much anymore. I pay attention to my some of my colleagues, and my co-author Gary Smith, who does lots of these tests. And there's other people. I mean, a lot of people do these tests. They're very fast. As soon as some new version comes out, they're right there with the tests. And I know then there are people that are mad that say, "Oh, why are you trying to find these exceptions?" Well, it's because we're those kinds of people. We want things to work right. We're concerned about our reputation. And I think that there's a lot of consultants who maybe haven't been this so successful, don't have a message, and they see AI as a big chance. And they never really were an expert in coding, so now, okay, they can do coding with AI. I don't want to criticize them, but, because they're just seeing opportunity. And that's natural. They see an opportunity, and they're going to try it. And they should try it. And I'm glad they're trying it. Somebody has to try it. It's just that it seems that the expectations have been pushed up so high because something's going to come out of this AI. There's a lot of good things I can talk about, but they're not worth the $10 trillion in added market capital. The market capitalizations have been added to the Magnificent Seven since January 2023. It's not worth 10 trillion. 10 trillion is a big number.
There's not even that. They're talking, Dr. Funk, they're talking about the economy. Yeah, they're talking about they added so many trillions to the GDP, right? Like a growth of 4 or 5% to the economy, just due to the fact that there's now AI in the mix. Yeah. You don't find that those numbers are real.
Oh, absolutely not. And you have to realize that this has been going on for a long time. I remember back in 2017, McKinsey and Accenture and PwC, a lot of these big consulting firms, projected that AI would add economic gains of $16 trillion by 2030. And you look at AI software, and you're talking less than 50 billion now. It's nothing. It's nowhere near a trillion, much less 16 trillion. We're getting close to 2030 now. And so this has been going on for a very long time. But I'll tell you, those consulting firms made a lot of money by making those projections because they scared all these countries, not just companies who said, "Oh, we got to know about this AI," but countries said, "Oh, we got to have an AI strategy." So they paid McKinsey and these other big companies big money to come up with a strategy for them.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like it doesn't matter that nothing happened according to McKinsey, because they're bros with these guys now, and they're holding their hands as they go along and helping them adjust all the newest information. And it seems like a lot of these countries don't step back and say, wait a minute. These guys have been telling us things that don't happen. We shouldn't believe them. We should find somebody else who's a little more accurate. But no, these big consulting firms, they have a good reputation, right? They're famous. They all got MBAs from the top business schools. Oh, no, we got to stick with them. And maybe their CEO also was with them once, So there's a lot of this movement between the big consulting firms and becoming CEOs. So everybody wants to believe in these, or not as soon everybody. A lot of people want to believe in these big consulting firms. They want to believe in the MBA and the universities that provided the MBAs to go work in those big consulting firms. And really, what people need to do is to step back and say, wait a minute. There is better sources of advice out there than we're getting.
Is there close to saying, okay, well, the emperor has no clothes? Meaning
very
somebody.
Much so. That's very much what's happening, and people don't want to say that. People don't want to say that, and And as long as the stock market stays high, then probably a lot of people are going to believe it. It may take a long time, before people change their minds, And of course, some of this AI will work out. I mean, some will. It's just that I don't think it's going to work out anywhere near as fast as the stock market suggests.
And Jeff, talking about the moon landing, right? The computer navigation computer on board was like a 386 or 486, something to the extent where it was 20 megahertz or some sort of, and they allegedly reached the moon and landed, and they came back. Today we have 16 core, 2 gigs. I don't know how many gigahertz in our pockets. So things have progressed dramatically. So maybe maybe not in the trillions of dollars of expected revenue from AI, but things are improving, at least from a technology perspective.
No, absolutely. Moore's Law has had a tremendous impact on a lot of industries, enabling better and cheaper computers and smartphones and video game consoles and on and on. And certainly the people who sent us to the moon in 1969 were thinking a lot more carefully about problems, right? They didn't have any, no computing power was going to save them. They had to think about all the things that were going to happen and very carefully and come up with the algorithms and hardware all this. So they were thinking very different than the way people think now. People just think, oh, we do an update, we do an update, we do an update, we do an update. Who cares, And they're not being very careful.
But maybe we're based our whole economy. I think ever since they got rid of the gold standard, is based on the next bubble, the next hype. It's like, I mean, you need these unicorns, and also I would say, people like to think that there's going to be this magical power. I watched Wall-E, right? Have you seen that movie from Walt Disney a while back, where people are like they're like on floating chairs and they're seeing the screens? Maybe that's some sort of worse depiction on but I would love to have a robot that does my laundry and cooks for me, and bring my car and all that stuff. When are we getting there?
Yeah. Well, it's going to take a long time. I mean, the things that I was predicting in the early 80s, that my colleagues or my professors were predicting, they were predicting things by 1990 that didn't get there until 2010 or 2015, or, a lot of people, the media will hype up some and say, well, this is incredible, this big advance. And I say, well, that's hardly different from 10 years before. People are very bad at mapping out what's happened over 10, 15 years or 30 years, right? You look at VR and AR and how the predictions back in what existed 30 years ago and what's today, it's better, but the rate of improvement isn't that fast. But I want to go back to the bubbles, because you're right that bubbles are a big part of our economy. I mean, they've existed for a long time. I mean, most people have heard of the tulip bubble back in the 1600s. So bubbles are not inherently that bad. And even the dot-com bubble, a lot of good things. I mean, the internet came out of that, and e-commerce, and and all the news websites, and a lot of good things came out of that. And so people will say, well, something's going to come out good today. Maybe so. But, the 2008 bubble, nothing really came good out of that. All those subprime mortgages stuff, they disappeared. And, fintech came out of that, you might say. And buy now, pay later, that's kind of the subprime mortgage of today. That hasn't done very much. And so I look at the bubble today, and it's bigger, I think, than the dot-com bubble. In my book, I go through the market sizes for all these technologies, show that every decade there was big new digital technologies, but we're not seeing them yet for 2020. And I'm holding up 2024. It's not happening. E-commerce was worth $100 billion in today's dollars in 2000. It was huge. People forget this. I mean, I remember because well, first of all, I got the numbers. I mean, I went through, all it's easy with search, right? You just Google things and you find these old reports that say the market was so big in 1990 and 2000 and so on. And, but I can remember, what was going on with e-commerce, because I remember I was buying so many books, and there was music people were buying. There was a lot of obviously stolen music. I mean,
Napster.
Yeah.
Right?
But
Napster was big back in the day.
Also, lots of websites. People were really reading websites, and at first it was free, but then gradually it's become paid. And now a lot of these websites, they're huge in terms of the money they make through the subscriptions. So I look at what happened in 2000 as much bigger than what I see now. I see all the e-commerce of the books, the music, the computers. Computers also were big very early. Much bigger than what I see for OpenAI subscriptions, right? It's a few billion there versus 100 billion 2000 in today's dollars. So, I don't see the benefits yet from AI that we saw from the internet in 2000.
What about, the prediction we're going to lose all those jobs, right? There's going to be no jobs available, that everybody's going to be displaced by, thinking humanoid. Schmidt just came out, he predicted that by the end of the decade, there's going to be 300 million jobs lost.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. I mean, you see what goes along with that prediction is that we're going to have this huge productivity increase. The reality is we're not going to have a huge increase in productivity. It's not going to be a huge increase in productivity.
And what stops it, Dr. Funk? Why are we... So they're predicting it, but yet you mentioned that there's no way we're going to be completely autonomous, being. We're going to just press on a button and this humanoid would do all our work.
No, there are people who want to convince you that everything is going fine. Oh, there's been this lull, right? Things aren't going as well. There's this lull. And things are going to get better. And it's going to get so much better that we're going to be out of work. And so there are big consulting companies who get huge pay salaries. There's big MBA programs that are teaching this stuff. They get big salaries. So these people want to convince everyone that things are going to go really well. And, you can go through the numbers and argue with the numbers, and people do this. And Robert Gordon, The Rise and Fall of American Growth, published in 2016, is the best book so far, demonstrating how much bigger the improvements in productivity, how much bigger the new products and services were, from 1880 to 1940 and even up through 1970 than they are today. There's a big slowdown. There was some slowdown in 1940, then a bigger slowdown in 1970, and it's continued to today. And, some people want to argue otherwise. But, for me, the real proof that things are a problem is if you look at what the American electorate is saying, not in one party. If you look at the middle class, what middle class is saying, for the Republicans and for the Democrats, the same. Things aren't going well. We don't like all those factories that close. We don't like the lower salaries. Yeah, there are people that are doing a lot better off. It's mostly people who are in the top, 10%. So just listen to what supporters of Trump and supporters of Kamala Harris are saying. They're kind of saying the same thing. There's a problem. Things aren't going well. Right? So the numbers, you can make the same argument, but you don't even need to look at them. But you just look at what people are saying. They're upset. They're upset that things aren't going well, and they have different reasons why they think there's a slowdown in productivity. Right? It's very complicated to try to figure out what happened. You can go through a lot of things, and but I'll leave Robert Gordon and other more reputable economists to answer that, because they are going through big data sets and looking at inputs and outputs, and so they know about this better than I do.
So typically, Dr. Funk, there's in order for us to get out of the bubble, you have to create another one. I mean, that's, and you're smiling because it's true. So we created this massive, I guess, AI bubble with productivity and all that. What's the next one? Is it quantum computing? Are we going to mine asteroids for precious metals, or what's
That's
next?
a good question. Both of those have surfaced in the last few years, and they could surface again. But you're right that these VCs and these startups, right? They have to do something. But I'll tell you why I don't think that's going to happen. If the Gen I bubble bursts, it's going to be hard for VCs to get money. It's already hard, right? Even with this Gen I bubble, the bubble is mostly in the Magnificent Seven. Startup funding, the money being given to startups by VCs is down by at least a half from its peak, at least a half, probably 2/3. And raising, the VCs have to raise money from investors. That's way down, right? That's even with the Gen I AI bubble, right? That had created a lot of interest, which caused some people to give money to VCs and VCs to give money to startups. But it can't compare to what it did 5 or 7 years ago. So if the Gen I bubble bursts, it's going to be really hard to get enough money for the VCs to get enough money to give it out, because a lot of investors are really concerned. And there was just an article a few days ago out in Forbes about a VC saying that half the startups that received funding between 2017 and 2023, 50 to 70% of those startups have gone out of business.
Wow, that's amazing.
This woman calls it the invisible bubble, the invisible recession, because she says none of the VCs want to say anything about this because this would decrease interest, make it harder for them to raise funds if they were to talk about this. So this is eventually going to be the problem for VCs. After the dot-com bubble burst, there was this long period of time where it was hard for the VCs to get any money and then to give out any money. And that started changing about, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, the unicorns, the rise of them, the peak IPOs and VC fundraising and giving out money starts about 2021. But I'll tell you, their reputation is suffering, right? There's a lot of people who are smart people who used to give money to VCs and now are saying, wait a minute. And so you're right, the VCs are going to try to push something else on us to raise money, but it's going to be hard because a lot of people have gotten smarter over the years.
Well, smarter, but as we know, bubbles, they prey on people. People don't remember, green tech. Let's talk a bit about green tech.
Well, you're right. It's WC Field says there's a sucker born every minute. So, right, there's ones, and right, if you change the name of the game, like with green tech, then you can attract all these people who previously would never have given money to VCs because they hated VCs because VCs were just funding things that weren't good for humanity. And now we have green tech. Oh my gosh, that's great for humanity. I'll give these VCs some money.
And not even that. I think that there's millions and billions of dollars that are forced on the economy. Meaning, for example, there's compliance. There's all these regulations that are being forced from the government onto these startups. Well, the tech to be in compliance. Yeah. In fact, if you are not part of this ESG on some stock exchanges, if you don't prove that you're ESG compliant, you're not even getting you're not indexed into the pension funds and so on and so on and so on, which forces these companies to invest into green tech and become neutral, carbon neutral and all that. You can't even get started with this stuff.
There's all this greenwashing, AI washing. Everybody's trying to look like they're doing the right thing. And it's a problem. I mean, it's a problem going for a long time. I'm a regular reader of the Wall Street Journal, so have been hearing this for a very long time, and there's a lot of exaggerations about green tech. A lot of exaggeration with everything. I mean, that's kind of the point of my book, is that we're hyping everything. The left, the right hypes it, and now you're bringing up the stuff that the left is hyping. Yeah, I agree. There's so much being hyped. It's very hard to cut through the hype.
So speaking of which, okay, so let's say, let's talk a bit about the book as well. Like, where can we get a copy of that? Let's say you're somebody who wants to be knowledgeable and discerning, like look at the investments, or be able to identify what is real and what's not. You have a PhD, you've been tracking technology for so many years, but maybe, and then aside from getting your book and reading and being aware, what else can you do to be knowledgeable and realize that things are not as they may seem?
Yeah. Well, I probably started doing this about 25 years ago. I started making my own predictions. I didn't publish them. I didn't tell anybody. You don't have to tell anybody. You just say, okay, there's this technology. It's out there. What do I think? I think that, and then you make a prediction for 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. You don't have to tell anybody, right? But this is obviously for young people, right? And you do that, and after, 5 years or so, you realize that things don't happen as fast as people claim, right? It doesn't happen as fast. So just make these predictions yourself. And of course, a lot of people already do that, but I mean, be explicit in your mind and say that, okay, I think this will happen. Because you want to figure out, how hard is it to make these predictions? It's hard. It's hard. But, a simple rule is that things don't change as fast as people say. Some people like to cite this so-called Amara's law, where things don't change as fast in the short term, but they change more in the long term than people thought. That's true for some technologies, but for most, it's not. And I mean, I can go through a long line of things that, have been promoted over the last 40 years that haven't happened. And just to mention one energy one, such like synthetic fuels were this big deal. In the 1980s, we were going to make all this oil from coal. It all got thrown up. Right. So
what about, I'm still waiting for Dr. Fung, I'm waiting for the hydrogen cells.
Yeah. Well, there's another one that's been around for a long time, right? And I always like to cite computers, because there was a very big innovator, Charles Babbage, in 1870, who created these kind of mechanical computers. And, he was truly a visionary. But would you say that he was right in the long term? I mean, how long is the long term? I mean, computers really didn't take off until 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. This is long after he was talking about them in 1970. So be careful about that law. Be careful about thinking that, but it's going to work out in the long run, because you can go bankrupt long before it works out. Not just in terms of money, but in terms of a career. If you went into a career in mechanical and computers in 1870, I'm telling you, you would have had to change to something else. Long time.
I watched, again, the devil's advocate. So I watched Back to the Future and it was 2015, and I think it was filmed back in the 80s, and they were depicting quite a few technologies out there that were correct about, there's so many, and you know what I'm talking about. So yes, predicting is hard, but they seem to be like spot on some of the tech stuff.
Well, some of these, mobile phones have certainly had a big impact, and smartphones. So I was all part of that. See, because when I was in Japan in 2000, the mobile internet took off, and I wrote a book about how it was going to affect the whole world, and the mobile disruption. The applications and technology driving the mobile internet. And I was right. That was when I was an optimist. And so that one really worked out. Now, I suppose some people might say, well, but you didn't notice the rise of social media and, how bad effect that's had on kids using their smartphones. And I'll agree with that. But yeah, there have been some technologies that have great tech.
So So, Dr. Funk, what would make you become an optimist again? Or is that the train has left the station for that?
Well, no. And you see, if you read my book, you'll see that I don't say that it's like AI is terrible, this is terrible, they're all terrible, nothing's going to happen. I don't say that. I'm looking through I'm looking for applications that are actually working, and so there's some that I say they're actually look like they're going to do well. So making advertising ads with generative AI, editing movies with generative AI. That's the biggest one I see happening. I mean, generative AI makes text and images. Think about what industries have that as an output, right? It's not going to help us make cars, do healthcare, that kind of stuff.
Do you think that the last actor has already been born?
No.
It's
not. It's not going to happen that fast. It's all editing. I mean, if you look at the movie industry, I know a little about this because my son is 11 years old, has been interested in programming and how you make movies for a long time. So we used to watch these Corridor Crew things that show how you make movies and how you physically create illusions, but then also CGI, computer graphics. So it's happening very slowly, and it will be a lot of editing, but it's not going to happen that fast. It's just, as people think, it's not going to be putting everybody out of work. It's not as if, okay, we're going to have a movie, all the movies are going to be created just from generative AI. No, it's a slow process of editing. So these guys, these movie makers, have been doing this for so long. I mean, just think back to Star Wars. I mean, the change in the computer graphics, right? Nobody wants to watch a science fiction movie from before Star Wars. It was terrible, right? And now they've gotten better. So, but it's a slow process. It's a slow process. And so, you asked me, well, what would change my mind? Well, when I read something that says, okay, generative AI is being used more in these industries than I thought. And I say, okay, so I modify it. So I say, well, it's happening a little faster than I thought. Because I never said it wasn't going to happen. I just said it wasn't going to happen slowly. Okay, now if it happened on a scale of 1 to 10, well, I used to say 2, now I'll say 3.
What about technologies like cold fusion or quantum computing? There's all these technologies that are, they promise. Imagine we have endless energy. I mean, that will benefit the planet, the population on it.
Well, you look at quantum computing, and there are increases in the number of quantum bits. Now, people told us, 10 years ago, if you just had 100, that was enough to do all the computing in the world. Now it's not. Now it's something else. They've actually increased by a lot. I don't know, thousands. But it hasn't really had that big impact on the economics. So yeah, in the long term, I think that quantum computing will do something, but it's going to take longer than people have been saying. In addition, you have to think about what are the benefits from quantum computing. Most of it is being talked about to be used to do scientific research. Now, one of the things that we haven't talked about, but which I've talked about for years, is we don't see that many technologies coming out of university research. Nothing like the 40s, 50s, and 60s, 70s, big time back then. So quantum computing may help, but that's the benefit, is that it speeds up this, but it's already real slow. So don't be banking on it having this big change in society, because obviously there's some other things going on in university research that need to be changed, or that maybe can't be changed. So quantum computing may help, but
so I'm sure you have
a silver bullet.
So I'm sure you have your own opinion about why that is. Why do you think that we are not as innovative from research?
I this paper with Lee Vinsel and Patrick McConnell in American Affairs. I guess it was published in December 2022 on the changes in basic and applied research. It kind of focuses on why we're getting all technologies that we don't want, like Web3. Remember Web3 and Metaverse? It was hype before the generative AI.
Oh, big time.
So there's big changes in the way we do basic and applied research. It used to be that Bell Labs and these other corporations, RCA developed the first LCDs. A lot of these corporations did this great basic and applied research. it doesn't happen anymore. Instead, we get all this money given to universities to research, and what do we get? We get a heck of a lot of papers, millions every year. We get a dramatic increase in the number of journals, most of them very esoteric. I call them hyper-specialized journals. We get massive increases in bureaucracy to handle all of these requests for money, sending out requests for proposals. Today's top researchers don't do research. They manage huge labs. And what do they do as a part of the managed labs? Well, they have to manage all the PhD students, all the postdoctoral students. They have to, write 100 paper authors with those people. They have to write them letters of recommendation to get jobs. It's a huge bureaucracy. We are wasting these brilliant minds. If you read, I can't remember the name of it, there's a book about Bell Labs that talks about, what went on in Bell Labs, the type of people there in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Those people were actually working. They weren't doing administrative work all the time. They were actually doing thinking and stuff because they didn't have this huge bureaucracy that we have today.
Yeah,
so there are big changes
super.
that we need to make. And
Well, do you think maybe AI has the promise to fix that? I mean, I've heard that you just have to connect the AI to allow it to do experiments at the speed of much quicker iteration and then design and whatever the case may be, and then you see new new medicine, new innovation coming from the quick iteration for some of these LLMs.
There's a little there, and there are some scientists who are using AI in a way that I think will produce something useful, but that's not what's getting all the media attention. What's getting all the media attention is this other stuff that's like this AI scientific assistant and this stuff where it can write a paper so fast. So right away, you see, we don't, if you spend more money on basic and applied, what you're going to get, you're not going to get more products. You're going to get more papers. We don't need any more papers. We don't need a scientific assistant that gives us more academic papers because we already have too many. We have so many that nobody reads them. What we need is to move technologies from not so good to better. It's about performance. It's about increasing the performance of nanotech. It's about increasing the performance of supercomputers. So many technologies as some basic measures of performance and cost that need to be improved. And that's what we need to focus on. But unfortunately, we've got too much obsession. It's not just an emphasis, it's an obsession on having so many more papers, having so many more journals. And oh my gosh, look at what we're doing. And AI is going to help us do more of that. We don't need that. Let's get the penicillin and the other things that actually make the lives of Americans better. And you know what? And then Americans might actually think more highly of scientists.
And do you find, speaking of penicillin, right? There's very few antibiotics being released, new ones that are, because some would say that there's no money in it. You'll take it for a week and you're done. It's better to invest in antidepressants or some medication you always take. So there's money being funneled in towards projects that are, revenue driven as opposed to, benefit for humanity.
Well, the reasons for this are very complicated. And so, I'm just talking about the changes in basic and applied research, but there's also big changes in the way that VCs and companies are acting, as you allude to, that I agree with that. There's so many changes that are moving us in the wrong direction. And a lot of these people try to cover it up by saying that, no, all this great thing's going to happen. It's going to happen. You wait 5 years. It'll be here, and everything will change. And 5 years ago, they're saying the same thing. It's not here.
What about this whole notion that we are in the, Cold War, a race to whoever going to get to better AI first? We are, as a chip manufacturer, the U.S. is advanced, 10 more years, and China is is mad because we put a boycott their ability to purchase NVIDIA. And then, this whole thing is just over the top.
It's another way to get money. It's another way to get funding. Oh my gosh, if we don't do it, China's going to do it. So we have to do it. And Eric Schmidt loves to do this. He loves to hype all this stuff up. And yeah, there are some bad guys out there in the world. And so we need to keep spending on defense, and they'll becoming better at defense. But and AI will help a little. I mean, you see these drones and things that are used to destroy tanks. I mean, this is amazing, right? You can, a lot can be done. So that's going to happen. And you may see more, AI work out better in defense than in commercial applications. But it's not like it's not like China is so far ahead of us today, because China's having the same problems we are. I mean, you look at their self-driving cars, and they all have these remote safety drivers. So, they're having just as many problems as us. It's not like they're ahead of us.
You don't think we're in risk of making it too good and facing a Skynet at some point where...
Well, there are some... I don't think that's going to happen, but there are, at least not in the near future. But there are some, I think disinformation is one of the biggest problems. And I know when I say that, a lot of people say, well, they think that I'm talking about, well, you shouldn't have any criticism of vaccines, or no, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about things that are controversial. We have to distinguish between things that are controversial, in which different scientists have different opinions, and things that just aren't occurring. I mean, just the photographs, the doctored photographs and everything that are obvious, that are not true. That's the kind of thing that we need to be fighting against. We don't really need to be fighting against the controversy of vaccines. And I mean, there's so many things, as you know better than me, there's so many controversial things out there. And I don't have a problem with that controversy existing. What I do have a problem is when people, are releasing information that 99% of Americans would say is wrong, is misinformation. So I mentioned an article, on a healthcare article a few days ago. Somebody posted on LinkedIn, and when I looked at the guy who posted it, I found out that he has this AI newsletter. He's making 7 figures using AI to just send out information. So here's a guy, he's making money and enjoying himself, pumping out misinformation, just using AI to say whatever will get his newsletter sold. This is the kind of misinformation that we don't need.
Well,
right? You want
to funk. If you can't beat them, maybe join them. Maybe just...
I get these offers. I get offers to write, to do posts. There's money to be made there. I mean, so I know that people who have, 1 million followers, I know they're making decent money doing posts for people. I've said that earlier, that there's so much money, in the media for websites are charging money to have to publish articles. Influencers are charging money to do posts. I can do that, but, then no one would care about me. If you do that, you do any of that, you accept any money, and suddenly people are going to say, well, he's not reliable. So I'm not going to do that.
Maybe you can do this incognito, like where you don't really tell anybody.
Well, the problem is that they'll tell by my posts. And, actually I've done a few positive posts that were because I was kind of optimistic at the moment. And actually I was optimistic about something that I'm still optimistic about. But people were asking me, did you accept money? Because they were immediately suspicious of me. And so recently, Huawei offered me money to do posts. They wanted me to go to this. They said, well, why don't you come to this conference and do a presentation, and then you can do some posts. And then after talking on the phone, I realized they didn't want me to give a presentation. They wanted me to do some posts. And they were going to pay me a few $1,000s for each post. And I said, no,
Dr.
no.
Funk, if anytime you say no, say, listen, I can't do it, but, David does his own show, and he'd be happy to take your money.
Okay. I'll remember that.
I'm only half joking. Yeah, but let me tell you this. So speaking of AI again, to go down to this topic and the rabbit hole. First, there's a lot of issues with we utilize it in a very different way, where it's like a black box, right? It spits out this information. There's hallucination. There's misinformation, and there's also AI poisoning. Like we have no idea where these LLMs are getting their information from, and then if with enough data that's being, and also there's a loop, like where with all this AI generated content, there's a kind of runaway loop where some bad data is being consumed again, and eventually it'll blow up in our faces. Talk to me about that.
Well, it's a big problem. It's absolutely a big problem that these big models they need lots of data, and where are they going to get the data? And supposedly we're going to have fewer hallucinations in the future because they're going to make even bigger models, which require even more data. And of course, a lot of websites don't want to give up their data, and so there's a pushback against that. And you see some deals being made by OpenAI and others to get data from Reddit and some other websites, but Reddit users don't like that, and I forget the name of the website. There's another one that did a deal with OpenAI, and the users, the people who are posting stuff, said we're not going to post anything anymore, because at least before we got our work acknowledged. Somebody who used their information was citing us, and now it's going to be gone, right? It's all anonymized.
Yeah, so, the same goes for artists. There's a tool out there that plants a bad pixel to poison the LLMs to not be able to do regenerate images based on that are copyrighted, that people, artists created.
Yeah, so there's pushback against that, and there will continue pushback. So these are some problems that my book doesn't emphasize, but acknowledges them, because it's going to be additional costs for AI, because people are going to continue to push back. And the courts will eventually rule on them in favor of artists, I think. It took a while before Napster got thrown out, and the same thing will happen with a lot of these cases where, the companies will be forced to pay money to news websites and to artists and things. It'll just take a while.
Mm-hmm. And some say, just kind of the tail end of this topic, saying that the future is really like these micro models, where there's going to be smaller, more dedicated LLMs for specific problems that can be, explainable AI, meaning that they're transparent. You can see what was being fed, and then potentially certify them, and then so you have full transparency of what it is that they do, and so on and so on.
Yeah, that may be the future. Andrew Ng, he was at Stanford and started some companies, was saying this 5 years ago. And, he may be right with LLMs. They may not be LLMs. They may be SLMs, small language models, because you may be right, and actually that's kind of I would say that's my prediction, that we're going to see more of that. We're going to see companies doing the training themselves. They will probably license some model from somebody to get them started, but then they'll train it on their own data to improve their processes. So, this is a big possibility for AI, is that you've got these, companies want to improve their processes. And I want to emphasize processes, that there's too much emphasis on, wow, it's really making me too productive. I mean, individually productive, but individual productivity doesn't matter. Just like looking at a machine and seeing how many parts a person can produce on a machine wasn't meaningful 40 years ago, right? Just-in-time manufacturing threw all that out and said, we don't need to have every worker producing parts as fast as they can. We got to reduce the time that it takes for the parts to go in the factory, reach the factory, to go out of the factory in completed products. We need to focus on processes. There was James Champion, Michael Hammer with Reengineering the Corporation 30 years ago, talking about processes. Improve processes. Don't talk about individual productivity. Improve processes. Identify them, figure out how to do that. Companies, I think, will eventually do that. They will train their systems on their process data, and they will improve their processes. But it's going to take a while, partly because it's just a complicated thing to do, but also because there's too much distraction, right? You've got people like Ethan Mollick saying, well, just get that LLM and figure out how you can do your job better, right? Oh, yeah, we're going to so people are going to figure out how to send out more emails, write more reports, and just game the system and look like they're productive. but not actually help the company, reduce costs, respond to customers better, introduce new products faster. That's what you need to do. You need to improve those processes.
It sounds like again, coming back to the fundamentals, meaning that, what makes a great organization and revenue generating organization, it's fundamental.
A lot of business is common sense. There's a lot of common sense things, and business schools have tried to change it. They tried to say, no, it's much more complicated than you guys think. It's more complicated. There's a secret sauce, and you come to our university and we'll teach you that secret sauce.
As somebody who did an MBA, and done a couple of SWOT analysis in my days, I can tell you that in real life, there's just more to it than the quadrant with that.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I used to, when I taught my course, I'd have other professors sometimes look at my slides and say, there's not enough theory here. There's too much context. I'd say, well, context is everything. That's all about business. It's all about understanding the exact situation the company is in or the division is in. You have to understand the idiosyncrasies of the customers, of your processes, of your product. It's all unique. You have to understand that before you're going to figure out how to do it better.
Context is king.
Yes.
So what about and the last topic before we part ways, because I know we go over time, and I'm so excited. We can probably keep on doing this for a while. Let me ask you this. There's a from a compliance perspective, it looks like the governments are trying to, there's a new bill that was trying to propose for increasing the safety of these AI, and it's funny because they were receiving guidance from Anthropic, which is, which makes Claude, it's really interesting, like how, and they have a lot of money. It's like, lobbying in Washington about like all these, what are your thoughts about putting regulation on top of that?
Well, I think that some regulation is needed, but we're probably going to end up doing too much, partly for the reasons you gave, but also from the traditional Republican standpoint, is that we're just going to have regulations and they're going to make things worse than they were before. So we need them, but they have to be done right. And how are we going to do them right? And how are we going to get the right people to do them? That's very hard. Regulation is just, it hasn't worked that well. We need it, but it never works well, because all the smart people, you can just make more money out in the real world trying to circumvent the regulations and coming up with good regulations. So it'd be nice if we could get some really smart people, industry people, to help produce some great regulations, convince them that it's in their interest to produce these great regulations. But
do you think that it would take some incidents? I'll give you an example. A lot of regulations, for example, with coming back to the vehicle or car manufacturers, right? They were done after the fact, seatbelts after a lot of people got killed where they're driving 60 miles an hour. Yeah. Maybe there's something needs to happen from people utilizing AI in the wrong way, and then they'll put in regulations as kind of as a reactive versus proactive.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, I remember when the Cuyahoga River caught fire in '69. Even a Republican president, Richard Nixon, implemented the EPA Act. So, this can happen, in certain situations, something bad happens, really bad happens, particularly for national security reasons. So I'm hoping that some generals will step forward and say, okay, we got to do this a better way because it's a national security issue.
Well, if there are any generals listening to this podcast, I highly recommend maybe reaching out to Dr. Funke with give you some insight in terms of what path to take. Speaking of which, let's talk a bit about your book and where to get a copy, and then what's the easiest way to get a hold of you, to get to know more and follow you as well.
Okay, easiest thing to do is to follow me on LinkedIn, and there are other people with my name, Jeffrey Lee Funk, and there are a lot of people with the last name Funk, but it's not like Smith. So you can find me on LinkedIn pretty easy. You just search for Jeffrey Lee Funk. The book is coming out October 22nd. The publisher, Harriman House, says it will be in bookstores, paperback. So we'll see. So paperback. You can pre-order it on the Harriman House site, or you can pre-order it on Amazon. Both are available now. Both so.
Did you ever use AI to write the book?
No.
So it's all like
this book has
all
been in
pen to
process for
paper.
a very long time.
It's
No,
said it's all
I
pen
don't.
to paper, like the old school way.
Well, I don't use pen. No, I use a computer. But you have to realize that it takes a long time to get a book published. If you're really famous, you can do it really quickly, but if you're not famous like me, you spend all this time trying to tell people, I want to publish it, I want to publish it. So you write a lot of it. And then finally, I couldn't find anyone to publish it, even though I published 5 books before, but they're kind of academic books, and I wanted to go for a book that would have more reach. And it's hard, you got to be famous. And a lot of top publishers, they'll ignore you. They have no interest in someone who isn't famous. They want to know that, oh, are you speaking every week? Or if you're speaking every week, then we'll publish your book. They say, why do you want to publish books? So I get more speaking engagements. And then they say, well, you should already have the speaking engagements. Yeah,
I think it's a chicken and the egg problem, sounds to it.
Yeah,
Sounds like.
it's hard to do. And, a lot of publishers don't really want a new message. They don't care about the message. They're doing it the easy way, which is, okay, we'll publish your book if you're famous.
And maybe the topic, maybe they wanted something sensational or maybe
No,
positive.
absolutely. They want something more positive. I mean, I love publishers say, why don't you just talk about these it has to be a how-to book. So my book is a how-to book, but it's how to avoid bubbles. So usually it's how to make millions, right? That's the kind of books that sell a lot. So my book is very, very counter.
I think you can, Dr. Funk, you could probably make millions by being contrarian. If you're like, I mean, there's quite a few of these that, manage to bet against the bubble. I mean, the timing is everything. They can lose your shirt if you don't do it at the right timing.
No, you're right. Timing is everything. So if the bubble were to bust, then my book would sell better. And the bubble isn't busting, Last night I went into bed, all these Magnificent 7 were down by almost 1%. And then I woke up this morning and a few had gone positive. So, you could spend your time doing this. I don't think it's a very good way to spend your time. I'm a pretty old guy, so I only have a few years left. There's a lot of better ways to spend your time. So, but yeah, contrarian message, maybe it will sell. Well, I'm open so.
Well, I think this, being on this show is a step in the right direction. I highly recommend. I think people will find it refreshing, actually, to hear from somebody who's with your credentials, somebody who's been there, done that, and also experienced that over and over again. All the way from the moon landing, if that really happened.
Well, I hope so, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very, very much. And once the book is released, I'll definitely share this, maybe the link of our description of this podcast. And
Okay.
I would love to get a copy, maybe a signed copy would be
Okay.
even best.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you can publish it earlier because there's October right before the publishing date. There's a lot of people are going to be buying the digital version.
Yeah. Well, I'm old school. I like to have the physical copy. It's
Yeah.
it's much. There's something to be said about maybe the virtual.
Well, there is.
version.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you feel the same way once you actually receive a copy. And then after that, I hope that you get way more of these where you get invited to speak.
Well,
and
I hope so.
maybe not mainstream channels, or maybe who knows? Maybe the bubble is going to burst and then they're going to be all over the news. But until then, thank you very much for joining, and looking forward to getting a copy once it's
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thanks for all those who joined. Looking forward to seeing you the next episode. Until then, stay safe, online as well as offline. I'll see you guys soon. Thank you very much.